Bridge gets ahead on it. There's the shot. They score! George Picus swings it in near post, headed away, and it's in! It's in! Canada has got in front 2-1.
This is True North Soccer Talk with Jacob Burnley and Ben Perez. True North Soccer Talk is a 100% student-produced Canadian soccer podcast. We are hoping to cover as much as we can, promote as many voices as possible, and share our love for the beautiful game. We'll be talking Canadian Premier League, Canadian players, past soccer stories, and much, much more. We aim to create a welcoming, casual space to discuss soccer in our great nation. We would also like to give a special shout out to CHMA 106.9 FM here in Sackville, New Brunswick, for allowing us to use their recording studio. We are just a couple of guys who love soccer, have little production skills, yet have big dreams. We thank you, our listeners, for joining us on this journey as we look to share our passion, hear about your passion, and help to build up this beautiful game right here at home. This is by Canadians for Canadians. If you have any questions about our program or just want to talk soccer, reach out to us on our Twitter at TNST Podcast. That's at TNST Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Well, let's get right into our first segment of the revived show, I guess you could say. Ben Perez was in Halifax this weekend. He will be joining us later on as a co-host. However, he was attending the Halifax Wanderers' first match. Yesterday, the Wanderers put forth a team of Atlantic Selects to face Dusseldorf's U21s. Stephen Hart's men found their way to a 3-2 win with the game going to penalty kicks. Lots of hype and energy surrounding the first game to be played by a Canadian Premier League side, and it really was a back-and-forth match. Dusseldorf went ahead in the 23rd minute through a goal from Timo Bornemann. However, Halifax got their first goal through Ibrahima Sano mere minutes later. And I think if you follow collegiate soccer in Canada, you may recognize his name. He played for the Holland Hurricanes and was the 2017 CCAA Men's Soccer Player of the Year, so this past season, and was awarded that at the National Championships in Nanaimo, BC. The second half of the game saw the introduction of Jacob Schaffelberg, and he would prove to be one of the standout players on the day for Halifax. He drew a foul that saw one of Dusseldorf's fullbacks sent off, and despite being a man down, however, the German side regained control of the match through a 71st minute strike from Classic Connor, but Halifax responded instantly with a goal from Schaffelberg. St. Mary's University goalkeeper Christian Oxner would seal the win for Halifax with a spectacular penalty save. The Wanderers would take the shootout 5-4 and win the game. Obviously a massive event for the Halifax sporting community. Like I said, we had Ben Perez down at the event this weekend. He was putting in work volunteering with the club, and he joins us now to share his thoughts on what was really a marquee day for the Wanderers and for the city of Halifax. Welcome to the program, Ben.
Hey, Jacob. Thanks for calling in. I'm excited to get in the studio with you. I know it'll be a lot easier for us.
Yeah, for sure. I guess my first question for you, it was a busy weekend for you in Halifax. Give us a bit of a background of what you were doing in terms of your volunteer work. Who are you working with, and what were your responsibilities?
So I started just as a normal volunteer for for Sports Entertainment Atlantic, the ownership group for the Halifax Wanderers. But I sort of progressed, I would like to say, up the ranks throughout the weekend. So at first, I just kept asking for more and more responsibility, just because I want to get into sports marketing and event management and all that sort of that line of work. So first, I got where I was the medical contact for all the medical staff. So if they needed anything, I was the person they would call, and I'd be the problem solver in that sense. Then it evolved to me being sort of in charge of team services. So working with both teams, getting all the ice they needed for players, getting all the water and Gatorade, all that stuff for players. And then it evolved to me actually manning the camera for the Halifax Wanderers coach who wanted to film the game, so then they could look back and identify some of the key players and look at what they've done, just for potential, scouting and recruiting. So I ended up being in charge of quite a bit, and I look forward to doing more for them in the future. And I was also working with a few people. I was working with the director of sponsorship, Adam Burrell, the event manager, Rhea. I forget her last name off the top of my head, but she was really great. She was a really, really key member of this, and I met Derek Martin, the owner, and talked with him a little bit, and they seem to have a really great group operating the Wanderers. I think that's going to be a really strong point of the organization. It's their management.
Talk a bit about the event itself. How was the supporters? How was the atmosphere and sort of the consensus around the ground?
Well, the atmosphere was interesting. It was quite a mix of people. The supporter section started out pretty small. It wasn't even all that full for the first 20 or so minutes, and it filled up pretty quickly. I can see the supporters group definitely starting to take up more and more of the East End line stand where they, have set up, because right now they only have about a third of it. As it is a small ground, that's not all that much. It's probably about 80 to 100 seats. But it was weird. There was some pockets of the stadium that were really loud. So right next to the media tent where I was doing the filming, in one of the VIP suites, there was a really, really rowdy group of fans that were singing along to the Privateers 1882 songs, but it was about 8 people, and they were incredibly loud. So it was odd, and then, there would be the group of people that were just sort of, the kids that got tickets because they play on a local soccer team, and those sections were kind of quiet, and it definitely wasn't a full packed house, to say the least, but it was definitely a pretty good atmosphere, considering that it was an exhibition, and there wasn't, it wasn't a real team, so to speak. There wasn't, any personal connection to any of the players in a way, like they hadn't done any press releases on like these brand new signings, stuff like that. So considering that it was a group of people that almost no one had heard of, for the Atlantic Selects, it was pretty good. It was a pretty good home crowd.
Yeah, and I think that's just it. I think when we are talking, this is an exhibition game, and I think that just from kind of following what was going on online, it seemed like the event was quite a success.
Yeah, and it was positive. A lot of people left the ground with a big smile on their face. I mean, the first win in Wanderers history, so to speak. I mean, I'm not sure if we'll really ever actually say that in truth once the season starts, but it was definitely a good way to open up the account for the Halifax Wanderers. They, there was a lot of people cheering for the Wanderers, and it wasn't a lot of neutrals. I mean, all the ones that were cheering and being loud were all Wanderers supporters. I didn't hear anything that was sort of neutral. And I mean, obviously, the fans appreciated the good goals from Fortuna Dusseldorf, but it wasn't exactly there wasn't an away end. And so it was kind of it was a very one-sided crowd, to say the least.
But a good hometown atmosphere, I can imagine.
Yeah, and I can only see it improving as, people form a bigger connection to the team. I mean, as we said, this team is literally brand new. There's one game in its history, and it doesn't even really count because none of the players are under contract. The only thing we have is a coach, an ownership group, a logo, and a pop-up stadium. So, and some merchandise, but that's it. There's no 100 appearance players that have been there since the start. There's nothing like that. And that sort of is something that once that happens, a connection to the team, the team you grew up supporting, then we'll see that atmosphere really, really building and become a really raucous crowd.
For sure, yeah. I mean, you mentioned there the players, none of them were under contract, but I did think that Halifax, the Wanderers, did a really, really good job of scouting in the Atlantic Canada, and there's quite a few players from Atlantic University Sports, so U Sports. If you want to touch on that, because I know we do the odd broadcast for AUS Soccer, so some of the names are familiar. If you want to touch on sort of the local contingent of players that were representing the Wanderers.
Yeah, it was surprising to me that most of the best players came from AUS. I mean, we see the Mount Allison Mounties playing, and we don't think of many of them going pro. But there was a lot of players in the AUS that were playing in this match that I could really see actually being on the Wanderers, as they were some of the best players on the field. There's a few of them that, from St. FX and Acadia, the goalkeeper, I believe, Christian Oxner, I believe, plays for Acadia. I could be wrong.
I believe St. Mary's.
He plays for St. Mary's.
St. Mary's, yeah.
It was one of the two in my head. And I mean, when we played against him this year, he was incredibly solid. And I think he was the standout player of the game, one of the standout players. And there was this moment, because they had these water breaks every 25 minutes because it was so hot, where it was 2-1 for Dusseldorf. They were already, and Dusseldorf was down to 10 men already. And he sort of took everyone into a circle, and he showed this leadership that was very, very strong. And I could see him being an incredible presence in the locker room, even at such a young age. I mean, he was screaming. He was giving it his all, and he was like, we're not going to lose this match. I mean, there's a few expletives in there that I can't really repeat here, but he was so passionate, and it was just an exhibition game, and you can only imagine how competitive he'd be if it was a full match. So
fantastic. Another player I wanted to mention was Jacob Schaffelberg. He came on at halftime and really sort of grabbed the game by the neck, it seemed. I'm not sure if you have anything to touch on there, or if there's any other standout players that you may have noticed.
I don't have too much to say about Jacob Schaffelberg, but there's a defender in the back, and his name's kind of escaping me. He was number 4. He was a tall, strong defender that was able to dribble out from the back. I believe he plays for St. FX. And he was just really solid. I believe he wore the captain's armband actually throughout the game, and he was another strong influence. He was extremely calm on the ball, and I mean, this is an experience that very few of these players have actually had in their past. Playing in front of 5,000 or so people. It's pretty new. It's completely new to all of these people, and the fact that some of them came out and had some of the best games of their life was, incredibly sort of motivating, and it sort of gives me a lot of potential hope for the future of the Halifax Wanderers, especially with homegrown talent.
For sure. Like I said, I'll repeat this again, but I think they did quite a good job. For the short time they had, they did quite a good job of scouting the region and getting some of the best young talent out of Nova Scotia and out of the AUS. So really props to them on that. I guess sort of the final wrap-up question, and it kind of goes along sort of our second question regarding sort of the event, how people felt. I guess it seems as though, and this is just my sort of perception, but Halifax is one of the leading clubs in terms of community engagement, in terms of sort of what they've done so far in regards to the Canadian Premier League franchises. They've been very active through social media, through community events. I know there was the World Cup viewing party they had for France-Croatia. This event, they're sort of leading the line. If you could touch on that, I guess, and sort of what you saw at the event in terms of just organization, in terms of the organization itself, and I guess just where you hope it goes from here.
Well, I think it all comes down to the ownership group. I think they've looked at a lot of the models of the smaller European clubs, the Aston Villas or the Bournemouths, or the Burnleys even, and sort of seen that this isn't going to be a team that draws fans from, China and, Asia and all around North America. It's going to be a community-based team, especially in the start. So they sort of realized that and put a lot of their eggs in that basket, so to speak. So, there was so many kids that were wearing local soccer jerseys from, City and Halifax Central and, the Sackville teams and the Dartmouth teams. There were so many of them. So they targeted that really well. And, I mean, that's important. You want to get the kids involved. So that really, I think, is a strong point. And they've realized that, it's going to be 100% community-based. This is not going to be an international club for the foreseeable future. And, I mean, who knows? Maybe Halifax could become a cult club that, all the fans in Asia and around Europe, that's their North American club. But I somehow doubt it. That'd be kind of an odd dream to have, Halifax Wanderers are, just as highly valued as United or something like that. But
I also think that's not what the league wants necessarily.
Exactly.
It's this by Canadians for Canadians mantra, which I really respect. And I think, I think so far each team that's been announced has kind of followed along with that. So it's been fantastic.
So as I said, it's going to be a community-based thing. So I think there's going to be a few different supporters groups. There's going to be Privateers 1882. I could see, there's a lot of, multicultural social clubs. So, there's a Portuguese social club and, there's the Lebanese Cultural Center. So I could see, supporters group propping out of those sort of regions. And I think that could be really good for the club. But I also see it being a lot about, part of your, if you do a summer camp with St. Mary's or Dal for soccer, part of your, entry fee is, maybe you get a ticket for free. The kid gets a ticket for free, and then the parent it's $5 or something. Like I see a lot of stuff like that, and that's how they're going to grow the club. And I think that's sort of what I took away from the event is that this is for future Canadians as much as it's for, if not more than it is for current Canadians. So it's for the kids that are, trying to find a role model for soccer or something along those lines. That sort of seems like that was the feel of the event because there were so many kids there. It was incredible.
For sure. And I think we've talked about this before, how you mentioned, some guys in Halifax who they wanted to take that next step in the career, and they were, they went to the Impact Academy or they went to Toronto, and that was sort of they had to make a sacrifice there. But with this new league, they can try and make it at home, which is really fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for the first 10 or so years, the ones that are, say, when you say make it at home, it's going to be the ones that, they play a few years in the CPL as youngsters when they're 17, 18, and then, an MLS club scoops them up sort of thing, or a European club. I mean, that's less likely than MLS, but it seems like it's going to be the ones that make that step from CPL to MLS are going to be the young ones that, have a lot of potential. It's not going to be the journeymen that, come in at 25 to 28 and then end up scoring 30-odd goals in a season and then go up. It's going to be the young guys with the potential.
The Canadian Premier League is going to do a really good job of building this foundation for Canadian talent, certainly. And, I mean, we'll talk about this at another time, but the whole Alphonso Davies story, I mean, playing soccer in Edmonton, getting picked up by the Whitecaps, going through their system with Whitecaps 2, which actually no longer exists, but going from Whitecaps 2 into the first team, and now with a contract to play in Germany with Bayern Munich. So, I mean, it's really great that there'll be this platform for young Canadians to hopefully get noticed. And, yeah, I guess if you have any final remarks on the event.
Not too many final remarks on it. Just really proud of what everyone did. Just was really happy to be involved, and it was just a really incredible feeling for a soccer fan to see soccer come to Halifax. I mean, I just never really expected that, and to have something of that magnitude, 5,000 or so people watching soccer, and it wasn't even that big of a deal when it comes to the match. It was pretty surreal, and then to see the winning penalty taken was just, I got goosebumps because, this is going to be happening for years to come. And I mean, even if we're a losing team, which, you never know, we might be one of the worst teams in CPL history, but
you could also be one of the best. Who knows? The
exactly,
slate is clear, which is so cool.
Exactly. It's just the fact that we're here from the start is, it really hits me right in the heart, and I'm just so excited.
For sure. Well, thanks for joining us. We'll look forward to having you in the studio.
Yeah, can't wait.
That was Ben Perez for True North Soccer Talk, talking about the Halifax Wanderers and their first game as a club. The Atlantic Selects defeating Dusseldorf's U21s by a score of 3-2. Absolutely fantastic atmosphere there, and great to have a recap from a man on the ground. That was the first segment of our 100% student-produced True North Soccer Talk program. If you like what you heard or have any questions or suggestions, send us a message on Twitter at TNST Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. That's all we have for you today, just a short update. Hope you enjoyed that. More excellent content coming soon. Just having a fun time talking Canadian soccer and sharing our casual thoughts on the beautiful game.